Hello guys, Kimi Katiti here. I just wanted to share some thoughts on The Last of Us, Vengeance, and Dehumanization. Spoiler alert. So I just think it's interesting how you have this play with dehumanization, and follow me here. This game has a very interesting parallel between those who are legitimately dehumanized by the infection, so the infected, and those who are dehumanized by us versus them mentality between the factions, like between those who are really fully human still, have not been infected, are trying to survive. There's still this spiritual level of dehumanization at play. You have in The Last of Us Part 2, kind of jumping fast forward, and I'm going to talk about the two like as one story, right? But in The Last of Us Part 2, we have these three main factions. There's a fourth one at the end, but let's talk about the three main factions that are present throughout The Last of Us Part 2. We have the people who build this thing in Jackson, the Seraphites, and we have the Washington Liberation Front. All of these factions have their authentic, legitimate, roots. The Washington Liberation Front were once the Fireflies regrouped, and then we have Jackson, which is just honestly a group of people trying to survive. And then we have the Seraphites, who found meaning and purpose through this lady who was like a spiritual figure. And so they called themselves the Seraphites and kind of committed to a very pre-technology way of life. So they all have these very legitimate and very noble beginnings. But as we play this game, those human factions, fully human factions, get reduced and kind of get given these new labels. We have, like we see with the infected, right? They go from human people with names and with human pronouns. And then they go into this reduction of it because they're no longer human, and they don't even refer to them as humans anymore. People, they don't say there's a guy over there. When Ellie is going through, or Ellie and Dina are trying to clear out these infected, they refer to them as the infected. They refer to them as objects. So we see a very, very real example of dehumanization, and in fact quite valid example of dehumanization as these people cease to be human. But then we see a new tier of dehumanization occur with these factions, where the Jackson people, in the eyes of the Washington Liberation Front crew, especially Abby's little crew, they kind of just call Joel the smuggler. So they're just going after the smuggler, right? Washington Liberation Front, their initials are WLF, and so it kind of has a nice wolf ring to it. And eventually, they do refer to themselves as wolves, from what I understand. Their logo is also a wolf. But you also have the crew that is searching for Abby, in a sense, just dehumanize them, dumb them down, and reduce them to a group that can be justifiably exterminated by calling them wolves. Like, we're going after wolves, there's a wolf. And you use these labels to sort of justify the violence against them. And then finally, from all these, from the Jackson crew and from the WLF crew, we have the Seraphites, who then get reduced to scars. Again, making it easier to just group these people, scars, who are identified by having a scar on their face, but really are Seraphites, and in fact do not like the term scars. The way you attack and go after scars is kind of the same way you would attack and go after the infected. See, they get dehumanized the same level. Same with Ellie and Dina. The way they go after the infected is the same way they go after the WLF wolf people. So we see these groups become us versus them. And this kind of brings me to my next point, which is that once you dehumanize, you justify violence. You justify things that you wouldn't have done to your brother or sister. Like, you justify violence and, in a sense, extermination. And we see that if we come out of the video game and we go into real life for a second, right? You see that at play with the way we're so violent against one another on Twitter, because we reduce people that we don't agree with to just certain labels and certain terms, and seek ways to justify harm against them. Whether you are referring to liberals as, oh, these woke libs, or these libtards, or you're referring to Republicans as deplorables, or whatever have you, referring to any other group by derogatory, dehumanizing terms, you're eventually setting yourself up for justifying a sort of violence, whether it's a soft social death of cancellation or anything worse, God forbid. But it is the way that the video game lays it out. It is a great picture for us to take warning and to be very careful. You see the same reduction of labels in the way people of the past have justified violence against other groups. In Rwanda, people that were attacked and murdered were referred to as cockroaches. We have in the Holocaust, Jews were referred to as rats, and so on and so forth. And so I think this game really gives a brilliant reminder of what it means to be human and what it is to revoke humanity from another group and how exactly that occurs. The vengeance. So within the Last of Us world, we have this infection going on. And funny enough, the game is rarely actually about the infected. The infected kind of exist on the side, but it has more to do with the human relationships within the game and within the story. But the infected serve for a great parallel of a spiritual disease that starts to infect the people in the game in The Last of Us Part 2. So where we have the infected, getting bit and then wanting to bite someone else to satisfy that hunger, it's like they go out, they bite, they try to satisfy themselves, but they end up spreading this infection far and wide, right? In The Last of Us Part 2, we see this on another scale where Abby goes out for vengeance because she's not satisfied that her father died for no real reason, a reason that she couldn't understand out of nowhere. She goes out to satisfy, to get justice, to get vengeance, and instead spreads the disease of revenge and hatred even further. Same with Ellie. She wants more vengeance and ends up sowing seeds, and it goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and it is never done. And then to an interesting new layer, once at the end of The Last of Us Part 1, right? We know that Ellie is sort of the antidote. She's supposed to be the fix, the cure for this infection, the real infection that turns everyone into like a walking fungus. She doesn't actually get to stop the infection, and that's sort of the groundwork for the next part of the game. But in Part 2, Ellie does eventually get to stop the infection of the hatred, the infection of vengeance, once she releases Abby from the water after she tries for a while to hold Abby under the water and drown her. She realizes, you know what, this is not worth it, and pulls it back. And so in a way, she does get to be the antidote for something in a sense. But even in that wanting, even in the pulling back and in forgiving at that very late stage, because both of them and everyone involved in the different factions was at each other's throats for so long, and this fire was not quenched, it was fire fought with more fire, Ellie loses the one thing that kept her connected to Joel, which is her ability to play the guitar. We see the guitar come back time after time as a very significant item in the game. And to me, I understand it as the connection between Joel and Ellie. Because she's trying to fight for Joel's dignity through vengeance so hard, she ends up losing the one thing that kept her connected to him, which are her two index fingers that she would use to bar chords or hold chords on the guitar. So again, this whole thing has some very interesting themes with vengeance, but ultimately, it's a great picture for how forgiveness is a cure. And I don't want to be corny, but it is, at the end of the day, after you play the game and you're really involved in this, you see that there's no other way out except to really forgive. And we'll see what happens in Part 3, if there is ever a Part 3 or a continuation of The Last of Us. But I just wanted to share those thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And as I wrap this up, I wanted to share two verses from the Bible that speak to this. So we have Romans 12:19. Vengeance belongs to me, I will repay, says the Lord. A great reminder that when we want to seek out vengeance for our own reasons, it's really like an infection that only just spreads more and more and more. Can we trust God to avenge us, to fight for us, to be the one who sees the bigger picture? And then can we trust him with the second thing, which is Matthew 18:21-22. Peter asks Jesus, how many times do we need to forgive? And Jesus is like, forgive 70 times, 7 times. Can we trust him that forgiveness really can be a cure for this modern disease of hatred and dehumanization and vengeance? Love you guys, and I'll catch you soon.